This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube, and today I have one of the best up-and-coming UFO researchers out there, Cristina Gomez, who is a great source of UFO news and discussion. She has a podcast with Jimmy Church, and she's interviewed many of the top people in the UFO industry, including Lou Elizondo, which is actually how I discovered her. She has a great podcast with Lou. So how are you doing today, Cristina?
Hi there, I'm doing so well. How are you?
I'm doing great, but it's hard to keep up with all that's going on in the news right now with all this UFO stuff and Donald Trump trying to stir the pot a little bit today as well.
Oh, I totally get it. It is hard to stay up to date on what's going on, but that's why I'm here, right? To fill in those gaps for people because this is what I do. This is what I do, and I love it so much. But it's very confusing. It's very convoluted. And to be honest, I think with the latest news when it comes to New Jersey and these drones or UFOs, whatever they might actually be, I have never seen the comment section as heated as this. I had to compare it to maybe like the US presidential elections. Like that's how separated people are on these. Are they UFOs? Are they man-made drones? And the shocking thing is, weeks later, we still don't have an answer as to what's going on. But Congressman and President elect Donald Trump are finally commenting on it after weeks of just allowing it to stew in its own juices. It's very weird.
Yes, and do you find it mysterious at all that President Biden has yet to say anything? Now we've had Donald Trump comment on it twice.
It's disappointing to say the least because everybody wants answers as to what's going on. But when we're looking at Pentagon spokesman Sabrina Singh, she mentioned that they're not US military, they are not foreign adversary or foreign entity, and they're not Iranian motherships. That was mentioned by Representative Van Drew, I believe is his last name. And then we have spokesperson Pentagon spokesperson Kirby, who mentioned very similar things. So these people on the sidelines that are meant to speak to the media are commenting on this. But as for President Biden, again, it's disappointing that we haven't heard anything from him yet, or really anyone that's right under his administration. And then for President-elect Donald Trump to comment on it as of what I think it was yesterday in the evening or early this morning. And what he had mentioned was we need to know what they are. The government knows what it is, but according to him, he can't comment any further. And even though we've had these drone hearings last week, we are seeing more mayors for New Jersey comment on this, the sheriff's department in New Jersey commenting on it as well. We're getting all of these mixed signals. None of us have any of the answers, but while the FBI, the FAA, and the Pentagon are classifying it as not a threat, the New Jersey Sheriff Department redacted that and they're like, no, this absolutely is a threat. This is very dangerous. It's flying over people's homes. We don't know what's going on. And people are getting so frustrated and they're taking it into their own hands to shoot down these objects, which can be very dangerous because anything that goes up must come down, right? And then something else to mention rather quickly is that this has all happened before. In December of 2019 into January of 2020, Colorado had the exact same incident happen, and we're following almost the exact same narrative of there's nothing to see here. However, do not shoot these down. If they come to the ground, do not get close to them. If anything, call the proper authorities. And yet, nothing's a threat. Everything is totally fine, and listen to me, but don't listen to your neighbor next door. It's terrifying in all honesty, and more so is that these are being reported all around the world now. The focus was on New Jersey these last few weeks, and then the surrounding areas like Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, West Virginia, and so on. But now we're seeing them in the UK, in England, in Germany. They're being seen in Australia and a few other countries as well. And it's all happening kind of at this exact same moment at the end of the year. And I'm really enjoying watching how this is all unfolding, but no country. to our knowledge, has an answer, and they are all stating it's not for an adversary. If it was, in the case for the United States or even in Canada, the other countries would be definitely showing this level of like, oh, look at me, I got my drones, I got my craft to enter sacred airspace, this airspace in the United States, this airspace in Canada, and I'm super cool. But we haven't heard a single country mention any of that. So the public, we're still very much in the dark as to what these objects are. And of course, our imagination is running rampant. But maybe the answers that we might have inside of us might be right.
And we have heard some reports and seen some videos that these might be appearing in China too, but a lot of people are saying those might be fake. What is your opinion on if this is happening in China?
It wouldn't be a surprise, to say the least, just because when we're looking at other countries, for instance, like the ones I had mentioned just rather shortly, I wouldn't be surprised if China's also seeing these things. But we just don't know what they are. And right now, the blanket term are classified as these mysterious drones, but it could very much be like the new term for weather balloons, swamp gas, Venus, and all these kinds of things that debunkers have attempted to use to just brush off these UFOs. But this term, UFO, has been so stigmatized over the last few decades that it ended up being changed to UAP, which is the term that's being more used today. But in order to remove this kind of like extraterrestrial idea, um, the media and the government are classifying them as drones, even though none of them have been captured and reported to publicly.
And apparently, the Department of Defense put out a statement today on their website, and they are officially calling them quote unquote small commercial systems rather than drones in this statement. But one thing I'll say about the drones, for probably people like you and me who talk to people about UAPs or UFOs, sometimes they won't listen to you if you use that, but all you have to say now is drones, and suddenly they'll hear you out.
I don't know if they'll hear you out. I think in many cases, people are really deflated. They're over this topic. They're like, "Come on, guys, drones! Like, are you serious? Are you for real? It's so mundane. It's so boring. Why don't we have answers on these objects?" But when we classify them as UFOs or UAP, that's kind of where the curiosity lies, where the interest lies for a lot of people. And now more than ever, when we're talking about UFOs, it's finally being a more appropriate conversation to have with people. 10, 15 years ago, you would be classified as a person with a tinfoil hat. You're insane, you're crazy, go back to the basement. Now, we're talking about this on a daily basis, and it's not classified for these people that are in the that would be neglected by society. This is a very important conversation that we're having, and it's being seen all over the world. We're living in very, very exciting times. It's just disappointing that the term drone is saturating this topic right now.
And I noticed Ross Coldhart is trying to classify them as objects right now as
Right.
well because he's sick of hearing the word drone. But definitely it's heating up, especially today with Donald Trump talking about it. One of the things that's a mystery is why they aren't sending fighter jets to follow them. I mean, I understand that there's local rules and things like that as far as like what who can interfere in state issues, but at this point it's been going on for a month, and if one of the issues is that local drones can only go supposedly 40 or 50 miles an hour and these things are going 60 miles an hour, fighter jets you would think would be fast enough to follow them.
There are a lot of flaws in the investigations that are being conducted by the FBI and the FAA as well. And so you're right. Why aren't fighter jets being flown over or around these drones. The only incident that we have that's public information is that there was one helicopter operated by a military official. They were hovering over the drone, to my knowledge, and then they had this level of, quote, like fear and uneasiness, and then went back to their base. And they left the drone there in the sky doing its business. That's the only public story that we have that was coming from a representative last week, I believe. And that's not a good enough investigation. That's not a good enough explanation, because these are being seen in the people are seeing them, what, like 10, 20, 30 a night, every single night. And it's no longer just New Jersey. They're being seen all over the East Coast of the United States. They're being seen all over the world. And so to get these very really low budgeted investigations, it's disappointing. Now, I don't actually know how much money is being put into by the FBI to investigate these things, but based off of the information that we currently have and their lack of effort, it's like they're not being paid anything, which at the end of the day, it's our tax dollars that are funding these investigations. Something else to mention is, like, if we're looking at, for instance, the drones being seen over certain RAF bases in England or the ones in Germany, based off of the articles that I've come across, these are over either joint US English bases or US bases in Germany. I find that kind of odd as well, as to why the United States is being a focus here for some of these countries, not all of them. And then if we're looking at New Jersey in particular, if you like, if it's okay with you, I'd like to share my screen just on one image here. If may
Of
I,
course, that
Devin?
would be
Is that all right?
wonderful.
Yes, because I find this really, really important, and it's not being addressed in the sense that I feel like it should. And I'll make this brief. Here it is. Can you see my screen? Awesome.
Yeah,
All
there
right.
it is.
So according to REPI, why can't I zoom in? All right, here it is, which is the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program. This is a state fact sheet of New Jersey. We're looking at dozens of Army National Guard bases right here. But out of all of those bases, there is one that is the most significant, being the Joint Base McGuire-Dix Langhurst houses the largest and most advanced unit in the world for aircraft launching missions, and is the world's only base equipped to handle the entire spectrum of operations related to aircraft recovery and launch. Also about New Jersey, this is public knowledge, Lockheed Martin has a facility there that focuses on drones, 1 out of 3 states being New Jersey, Colorado, and California. Now, there are dozens of Lockheed Martin facilities all across the United States, but those 3 have more of a focus on drone operations and drone technology that they are developing. It's interesting to me that New Jersey not only has way too many Army National Guard bases, but also houses a Lockheed Martin facility that focuses on drones as well. Now, I'm not stating that all the things that are being seen in the sky are created by Lockheed Martin, but I just feel like it's too much of a coincidence, and we have to look at all the data here to make up our own minds as to what we think we're seeing in the sky.
Yes, and apparently that New York base that was shut down, Stewart International Airport, not a base, but I guess it's also a military airport, that was shut down for about an hour on Friday. That's also a military airport as well as a civilian airport. And then we have the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was shut down for 4 hours on Friday and Saturday. So it seems like they're shutting down, in particular, military bases and airports.
But it's not a threat, is it, Devin? According to them. But they're shutting down all these bases, but it's not a threat. Don't worry about it. Everything is fine. But the actions are not adding up to the words. It's very odd.
Yeah, and actually, the New York governor was just saying about a day before that Air Force or the military airport got shut down, that she was downplaying it. And then the Homeland Security Director, didn't he, a couple of days ago, he was saying, oh, this could be 15-year-olds buying these things at convenience stores. It's nothing to worry about. Then the very next day, he changed his tune and said, well, these drones do exist, but we don't know what they are, but it's okay because we're investigating them and there doesn't seem to be any imminent threat.
There hasn't been a single person caught that are allegedly flying these drones. And when the FBI catches someone, they make it very public. On their website, justice.gov, on December 11th, they captured a Chinese citizen that was flying a drone over the Vandenberg Air Force Base back in November. And it took them, 2 weeks to find the person where the drone was allocated to, right? And they put him in jail, and it was that easy, no problem. But these 40, 50, 60 drones that are being seen every single night across states, the FBI publicly hasn't captured one person that they think are flying these drones.
Yeah, because even Boston, they captured 2 civilians, I guess, yesterday or the day before, flying them near the regular airport, Logan International Airport, I believe. But I don't even know if they were charged because it just says they were apprehended. So it probably seems those were just civilians. So they seem to be able to catch civilians fairly easily.
Exactly. So it doesn't add up. We're getting all of these different stories, but they're contradicting one another. And so the fact that nothing is adding up, that in itself is a threat. When the information is so confusing for the public, for congressmen, for everyone that's listening in on this, why can't the right hand know what the left hand is doing? The most important thing to look at here is not the words that are being said, but the actions that are being done and the body language that's being presented on camera when people are talking about these things that are supposed to be in the know. But they all keep saying, oh, I don't know anything about it. Oh, it's not a threat. Everything is fine. But their body language is saying a little bit different.
And you saw probably Lou Elizondo's tweet the other day where he's actually pleading to Trump to kind of open the secrecy up to Americans, tell them what's going on. Why do you think he's coming out and like trying to put the pressure on right at this moment? Do you think something is going to like come out soon, or what do you think the reason is for the increased pressure?
I hope so. I think one of the biggest purposes for this increased pressure is because it wasn't just a 2-day flap. It's been weeks. And it's being seen, and I cannot emphasize this enough, it's being seen all over the world. It's not just one standard location. And of course, I think that in itself is all the pressure that is needed to make this information more public. There are these congressmen in the United States that have had private briefings and they can't comment on it. They've mentioned that time and time again, I can't comment, but I've had a briefing. And some have stated, oh, but it's not a threat. One word that we're hearing consistently here, and I'm not saying in the last few days, but like let's say in the last 2 weeks, because the narrative and the tune, like you had mentioned, Devin, is changing a little bit. But about a week, 2 weeks ago, the term that we were hearing consistently was they're not nefarious. And that's just, in my mind, it's not your basic word to use. But we're hearing it one congressman, one representative after another. These people of these very high positions, even the military, government officials as well, are stating these drones are not nefarious. They could have used any other word in the dictionary, but they're all picking that one. Now, in the last few days, I haven't heard it as frequently as a week or 2 weeks ago. But these people that are having these briefings, it almost seems as if they are being told, okay, when the public asks you this question, you're going to answer it exactly like this. Because, like I said, it's not a threat. Nothing to worry about here. And we don't want the public to be in fear. Because when the public is scared, that is where dangers lie. And yet, people in New Jersey, for instance, are so fed up with the lack of investigations that they are taking this into their own hands and they are shooting at these drones. There are even stories of people using their commercial drones to fly over or next to these SUV sized drones, like 6 feet long. And allegedly, their batteries drain out immediately. Now, if anyone that's had a drone that they've bought at the store or bought online, your battery can last anywhere from 25 to maybe 50 minutes, right? Like on a good day. Plus, you have to consider the weather as well. But to have an instant battery drainage isn't as common as we think it would be. So, for these conventional store bought drones to be flown over these objects in the sky, we don't actually know what they are, and then the battery to be drained almost immediately, it deserves concern and it deserves attention as well.
We are seeing multiple different objects in the sky. I know you review this very closely. What are the different types of objects we're seeing in your opinion? Because some of them do look like the Predator or Reaper bomb sniffing drones. They actually do. I had a military guy from Canada that I know point that out to me, and they do have the flashing red and green lights, which definitely would let us know that this is probably something of ours, even though they're saying they're not sending reinforcements yet. Or maybe they're on their way, or maybe they've actually arrived. But then we're seeing like these orb-like things, and then we're seeing like it looks like sometimes it's one object, but it really seems to be like a group of orbs moving together. Some of them appear to have like shape changing capabilities, and some of them appear to be able to go stealth and have instantaneous acceleration.
I wish I had the answers for you on that one, but I've also come across those same stories. And when we're looking at the lights in particular, the flashing lights that have usually been green and red as like our constant colors that we're seeing with these objects, when this was first taking place, people were brushing it off like, oh, it must be ours. Like they're flashing overall normal colored lights, even though the shape isn't the same, even though they are not registered to fly over certain airspace, the lights had this human element to it. And if they were trying to be in stealth, let's say it was a foreign adversary, they wouldn't be showing these flashing lights because that would give away their position, right? Exactly. And so this, people are brushing this off rather quickly. But as the weeks have progressed, these lights are still flashing, colors are changing, but some people are seeing these objects shapeshift. And that is one of the most strange details about these craft. And that is something that we can easily link, or more easily link, to the UFO phenomenon. People that have seen very strange things in the sky that they would classify as a UFO, UAP, that would shapeshift into different shapes, going from a cylindrical shape to a triangular shape, so on and so forth, teardrop, rectangle, and the list goes on and on. Now we're seeing that in the last few weeks. Not all of these sightings, but a good enough handful that people are stating how can some of these objects be man-made if they are shape-shifting? Now, I've spoken to a lot of people on this, and there's this idea that maybe, just maybe, some of these objects might be extraterrestrial, interdimensional, and they're using this kind of mimicry technology to where they're making their craft look human enough to pass, to pass our naked eye of like, oh, they're just ours. That's one theory. There are other theories that these objects are black projects. And I mentioned earlier Lockheed Martin, how they have their facility in New Jersey, along with Colorado. And Colorado had their very strange, mysterious drone flap in 2019 and 2020. Palmdale, California has another one, and California is known for its notorious UFO sightings. So maybe we're dealing with a mix here. We can't place all of our eggs in one basket and say, oh, they are all A, they are all B. But maybe we're dealing with different ones, and maybe that is why we haven't gotten an answer from the public, from the government, excuse me. Because how would you explain that to people? How your average person that isn't familiar with this topic, how would you explain it? Now, there are going to be people, and I agree, that are going to mention, why would you trust the government's answers? No, I get it. I get it. For a lot of people, it's that level of confirmation of, these people that are having these strange sightings in the sky, they think they know what it is. And then for a government that has billions of dollars of backing for their investigations and their own research, right? To a lot of people, it's just validation. But getting the actual answers, if you don't know anything about it, you're going to get answers with your own eyeballs from the overall general public. But at the end of the day, disclosure will not come from the government. It will come from the people. What's happening now is this a level of some kind of disclosure? Because at the very least, people are talking about this at the dinner table. I got the funniest email yesterday from a listener that has been for years, and a MUFON investigator. And he was telling me he was driving over to Eugene, Oregon to give a presentation on these drones. He was speeding a little bit, so he got pulled over by a policeman. And somehow he asks, okay, well, what are you doing here? Why are you speeding? Where are you going? The man says, oh, I'm a MUFON investigator. I am going to give my presentation on the drones. The policeman's eyes light up and he's like, yeah, so what is going on? Do we know anything about it? Anyways, that MUFON investigator ended up getting off with a warning. He didn't get a ticket, even though he was speeding. But what I'm getting at here is that a lot of people are hearing about this. People are talking about this. We're all curious, but we don't know the questions to ask. And right now, what's being shoved down our throats is it's not a threat. And what you're seeing is a drone. It's a conventional explanation, when in reality, it might not be, because we don't have any of the answers except the blanket statement of what you're seeing is a drone. But people aren't believing that anymore.
Someone's asking about the video where it looks like an orb is deactivating a drone, or maybe the other way around. They're talking about one in New Jersey, but the one I've seen, I think, is from Phoenix. That's been going viral lately, but it's hard to say if it's real or not.
We're living in really difficult times. I know it's like the worst answer to give, but AI, CGI is running rampant. And it's so difficult to decipher what is real and what is not if you do not have the raw footage that has all the details that tell me exactly how it was shot, when it was, the resolution, all these different things. So when I see something online that's a video or a picture, I take it with a grain of salt, because I need that information, that raw data, to really decipher if it's true or not. Because there have been so many instances, and this happened to so many people, where they vouch something as so real and so true. And then days pass by, weeks pass by, and they find out it wasn't. It's devastating. And so I think that we should look at all of them, but take it with a grain of salt.
This is a good question. There's a lot of people that have been talking about some of these things might be spraying something or leaving a trail of something. What do you know about this?
I don't know too much about that in particular. I've had people like comment on it, but I haven't looked at that in its entirety, so I can't comment.
And from your research, who do you think is visiting us, or if it's multiple people or visitors, let's just say, where do you think they're coming from, and how many species do you believe? Because I know Lou Elizondo's hinted maybe around 5 or 6, the UFOs and nukes, 22-hour, extremely well-researched book that's been out recently in a new edition, it's saying somewhere like 12. There's so much different information on who they are, where they could be coming from, how many. Just curious to know your opinion.
Looking at these different races, we have to kind of look at the people that have had these experiences, like the alleged abductees or experiencers. Because like to find the paperwork in a book online, anyone could fake that information, right? But when we're looking at people that have had these genuine experiences that have spoken to these entities, we're looking at like 5 or 6, right? About, and I'm kind of that's like a rough estimate. The biggest question is how many of them have always been here and they're sharing this space? How many are coming and going from their planet onto this one? And the question is why? What is interesting about this country, about this world in their mind for them to constantly do investigations, collect people, collect animals as well, looking at cattle mutilations as an example. Why? Is it because and we hear the terms of there are space brothers, they're here to protect us, save the environment, and cure cancer. People that have had these alleged alien abductions would say otherwise. Say it's so terrifying. They felt like they were molested, and they're not our friends.
The guy I
And that's
interviewed
really
yesterday, Robert Salas, who was a former captain in the Air Force, said they stuck a needle right into his you know what, and it was the most painful thing he'd ever experienced, just to make that note.
Robert Salas is a great researcher, and he's gone through a lot. When we're looking at these stories of people that have been taken, 9 out of 10 of them state that it wasn't a pleasant experience. Now, those that are able to do this telepathic communication, their viewpoint is so different. They're like, oh, they're so nice. They're interdimensionals. They're here to tell you and to tell me that we're here to save the world. So maybe we're dealing with different entities here, different species with different agendas. And it would be interesting to see if the government, if the military are in the know, are aware of these species, these entities that are visiting in and out, how many of them are in cahoots with each other, right? An example of this would be the Eisenhower Treaty, the alleged treaty that was signed between President Dwight D. Eisenhower and the Hook-Nosed Greys, where allegedly, and I cannot emphasize that enough, Eisenhower signed this contract where he said, I want to receive advanced alien technology and you can take people and cattle for your research. Now, during this time, the 70s, 60s, and 70s into the 80s was the highest rate of alien abductions that we know of, right? And same with cattle mutilations. Now, in today's world, it's not talked about as much, it's not reported as much as it was during that time frame. And I'm not saying that there is a correlation between the two. I am just mentioning it's not coincidence that we are seeing those two things happen at around the same time frame. This topic is so difficult to talk about because a lot, not everything, but almost everything is conjecture. And if you haven't had your own experience to where you can bring back information,
Well, we may all get to have an experience sooner than later, depending on what comes out of all this. But do you think some of them could be potentially crypto terrestrials? Because it seems like there's something going on underwater. So, like, could these be some species that have always been underwater and we're just noticing now because of all of this technology and everyone with cell phones recording stuff and the increased activity? Or do you think if there is something under there, it could be something from somewhere else that has just developed a base underwater?
the best place to hide would be underwater because only 10 to 15% of our oceans have been scanned and explored, leaving 75-80% in the category of unknown. And our technology can only go so deep in the water, which isn't deep at all. So that would be the best place to hide, to have a base, to do investigations, or if they've been there forever, that's where I would want to go. Plus, you're dealing with, like, to be fair, the deeper you go into the water, the more alien creatures look. Maybe they feel like they're already at home when they're so deep underwater. I don't know.
Yeah, and I've heard too that because a lot of these other planets are covered in water, that the environment under there might be a lot more comfortable for them because that's what they're used to. They might not actually be able to operate outside of water, at least some of these species, due to whatever planet they're from being totally underwater.
It's a possibility. There when we're looking at our statistics of exoplanets in our galaxy alone, and then we've got our universe, the most common planet are outside of the habitable zone that don't have water. They're just dry, rocky places, either too close to the sun or from a star, or too far, being super icy. Having planets that contain water are more rare than we realize, but also a little bit more than we considered as well. So, kind of in that happy medium. But for these entities that are coming from these other types of water worlds that people hypothesize might be in our oceans right here, I would I would like to talk to them myself and get some answers. But that would, anywhere you go, you want to terraform your location, where you want to be. And it's important that anywhere that we are, we want to make it as homey as possible.
The other thing I want to ask you about, because I think I found out about this from you reporting on it, even though I'm from Canada, is this Yukon object that was shot down. We all heard about the Chinese weather balloon, and they showed evidence that that was shot down, and they showed footage of it before. Then there was three other UAPs shot down that no one really ever talked anymore about. However, it was acted on a lot faster than they've been acting on these drones. But I believe it was you that may have been talking about this Yukon object that was in the U.S., but I guess they followed it to Canada, and then through a declassification FOIA request, I guess CTV News in Canada was able to receive a photocopy of this. But to me, this looks like nothing like the Chinese weather balloon looked like. And it seems like we were just supposed to assume that the other three objects were also weather balloons, even though we never had pictures. Weather balloons or spy balloons, whatever you want to call them, because it would allege that they were both at various points, I guess.
We're so frequently given a narrative that it's conventional, we can explain it away, but those words most of the time do not add up to the witness testimony, don't add up to some of the photographs as well, and some of the data that ends up being collected through FOIA reports. We've seen this time and time again since Project Saucer, Sign, Grudge, Blue Book, up until AARO. The narrative hasn't changed. And we've seen that recently with the AARO office, where Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet had mentioned during the latest UFO hearing back on November 13th, that when he spoke to the AARO office, they were trying to tell Tim Gallaudet that what he experienced had a mundane explanation. And to my ears, to my eyes, based off of that testimony alone, it's like we are dealing with Project Blue Book 2.0. And when we look at that office, that AARO office that's now being run by Dr. John Kozlowski, it doesn't add any confidence in people that the government is doing a proper job in investigating UFOs and UAP, even though it is being a more spoken about subject, even though the Pentagon, the FAA, and all these other departments and agencies are stating, oh, we want people to talk about this. We want to remove the stigma. That's why we changed the name from UFO to UAP, so that we can make it a more accessible conversation for people to have. That's their front face. But it's like a two-sided coin. They're saying one thing but doing another. Don't look at people's words, look at their actions, and that is the real answer they're going to be giving you.
What do you think of the AARO recently saying that they figured out the gimbal and it isn't a UAP in their opinion?
From that presentation that they gave to Kirsten Gillibrand just a few days after the UFO witness hearing and a day after the AARO report came out in November, his verbal presentation was 7 minutes long. The overall hearing was a little under 30 minutes long. He gave almost no valuable data to tell us that the gimbal and the Aguadilla UFO cases were explained away. I need a lot more information just because those have been sitting in the archives for decades, some of these for decades, but then they have been in the public knowledge for a few years, and people over and over and over again have looked these over and they're like, we don't really know what these are. We don't have an answer. And then AARO comes along, even though it was created in 2022, John Koslowski comes in, he's like, oh, we explained it. It was so easy. I mean, come on, guys. Like, are you smart or what? But the answers that they were giving, it didn't add up to the overall footage.
And apparently there was actually more footage than the piece that was released to the public that may have involved other vehicles too, wasn't there? And
We hear that
wasn't
every
addressed.
time, Devin. With every single UFO video, we always hear, but there's more. We just can't share it with you. Or where's the beginning of the video? Where's the end of the video? I don't know, but it's there, but we just can't show it to you. We've heard it too many times that it's deflating. It's like, well, why give me half the information? Nobody can formulate a proper opinion or analysis if not all of the data is made public. And that's where people are able to control the narrative, is when they only give little pieces of information that doesn't show the overall big picture. It's dangerous.
Why do you think the AARO haven't even made a statement in all of this if they're supposed to be the ones appointed by the government to be investigating this stuff? Wouldn't it be their job to almost make daily statements to the public about what's going on?
I agree with you there. I do. And a lot of people are asking that. I don't know where they are. I don't know why they're being so quiet, because they shouldn't be. They are meant to be the face, the UFO office face, to give us information. But we've only ever seen John Koslowski speak once, and that was during his AARO hearing last month. He came into office in August of 2024, even though we knew about him in January or February of this year, right after Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick resigned in December of 2023. We've only ever seen Koslowski once, and I don't know why, because right now would be the best time to address these things, as it's being spoken about every single day for several weeks now. There is no excuse for the AARO office to not come forward and speak about this.
And I know you really don't like Mike Gold from NASA, who spoke at the recent congressional hearing, or I find it funny when you talk about his testimony. For people that don't know your opinion on him, I believe that he actually lied under oath, just because he worked for NASA for so long, and I just can't believe he has so little knowledge on it. But what were some of the red flags that you notice about Mike Gold? I guess his testimony was better than nothing, but I don't believe he was being honest there either.
I don't think he even gave a testimony. He gave us no information. If anything, he was the cheerleader for NASA of, hey guys, AARO's not doing a good job. Give all the UFO information to NASA and we will be your UFO office. That was the overall narrative that Michael Gold was giving the public. I don't even know why he was a panelist for that UFO hearing. He provided no valuable information. Everything that he mentioned was kind of unimportant to my eyes. And I've been researching this for a few years now. I can understand why Michael Gold was invited to be a panelist because last year in July of 2023, a lot of the congressmen that were speaking during that UFO hearing last year kept up bringing NASA consistently. What about NASA? What about NASA? What can NASA do? How can NASA investigate this? They are all about space and investigations and their UAP independent study group. What about NASA? And I'm like, okay, I can understand that. Then out of all the people, they pick Michael Gold, who is an ex NASA employee who also worked for Bigelow, for the Bigelow Aerospace. But no questions were asked about that, which was very disappointing. But Michael Gold, he irritated me from the beginning all the way to the end. And I think it's because he just didn't have good presentation skills. It was very condescending the way that he spoke to the people, just like when NASA gave their media briefing last year. That was providing their research on UFOs of like, we're transparent and you can be at your boots. That's what Bill Nelson said. But they spoke to us like we were in kindergarten, like we had no idea what was going on. Michael Gold was speaking in that exact same way. He was also a part of that independent study group for NASA as well. We haven't received any other information from them, but overall, Michael Gold was a part of that panel to state NASA can do a better job at investigating UFOs. But based off of that media briefing that we got last year, I would say otherwise because they weren't transparent. They weren't transparent about their funding. They weren't transparent about the new director for that independent study group created by NASA. And they gave no valuable information. So I think at the end of the day, getting proper UFO research will come from a civilian or from a scientist that's merely following the data more so than the narrative.
And I just remember the interview I did with the Honorable Paul Hellyer, former Canadian Minister of Defense, before he passed away, saying that NASA were liars because with all of their satellites, how could they not know more about what's going on with UAPs? Because they would have some of the best visuals of the Earth from up above.
You would think so. You would. But we haven't gotten any of those answers yet. The same thing, Elon Musk has made that exact same statement as well. He's like, I have Starlink, but I haven't come across any information about UFOs either.
He's
just
kept his
seems to
mouth
be
shut
the
so
thing to
far, though.
mention.
He hasn't mentioned anything about UAPs since all of this started, right? In the past month.
It is odd because he definitely is a talker, right? He always posts his mind on Twitter. And so for him not to really address this to his, what he would classify as his full potential, it's weird. It's not following his personality traits.
The only thing I ever heard him say about UFOs, really, other than claiming, as you said, despite all these satellites, he doesn't believe in it or hasn't seen no evidence, was when he claimed that aliens built the pyramids, which I guess he just said as a joke, and it made like worldwide news, and then Egypt was in an uproar about it. It was just pretty funny. I think the Egypt Travel Ministry of Travel and Tourism even put out a statement against him. So yeah, I don't know. Someone wants to know, Shelley, and this is a question that a lot of people have, and this goes into that there's multiple things up there. So it looks like a drone, sounds like a drone, but it's a UFO.
So there have been some mentions that these drones do make noise that have like this kind of propeller sound, and then there are some that don't. If we go back to the idea, the theory, I'm not saying it's mine, but it's one that's being considered that if these craft are able to mimic human technology, then it would make sense for them to make sounds. But could some of these drones genuinely be drones or black projects? Yes, I think so.
And you're kind of an expert in alien encounters or UAP encounters with pilots. You recently just did a whole show about it. As far as the Oregon sighting recently, I think in Eugene, Oregon, where almost immediately they released the audio of the sighting, and they also interviewed the pilot. He's been doing interviews in Oregon and other places. What do you think about that sighting? And I have heard government officials say specifically that the stuff going on in other states does not have to do with the New Jersey situation. Do you agree with that, or do you think there's some correlation between the two?
Let's break that question into two parts. So we're looking at the Eugene, Oregon pilot sighting. I need to give people a little bit of context as to what's going on. So there was air traffic control audio that was released very soon after, where pilots were stating, I'm seeing these very strange things in the sky. Are you seeing them on radar? How do I go about this? I've come across and I've looked at and investigated a lot of air traffic control audio. And you will never, never, ever, ever hear air traffic control mention or classify an object as a UFO, ever. Because they are aware that this information will be either taken by government officials or be public information. And for them, they don't want to stigmatize the objects that are being seen by pilots as a UFO. So they'll use any other term. In this case, for the one that was seen was like last week, air traffic control had mentioned fly across that UFO and keep going forward. It was remarkable and it stood out so much just because they avoid using that term at all costs. There have been a lot of stories of air traffic control operators being told by pilots that they've seen very strange things in the sky. Many of the times, they are not being seen on radar. Soon after these strange sightings of UFOs, someone standing right behind these air traffic control operators and stating to them, you will give me that audio and you will tell me everything that was just mentioned to you, and then you will be quiet about it soon after. We've seen it too many times to count. And I can imagine that they have this level of fear as well on that. So for the term UFO to be mentioned, it's remarkable, and it might show the changing of the times with this, especially when we're at the end of 2024 and more pilots are talking about their UFO sightings more so than ever before. Because just a few decades ago, if a pilot were to ever mention they saw something strange in the sky, their wings would be removed and they would have an office job. We've seen that too many times. Now, the consequences aren't as dire. If anything, the pilot that saw this UFO in Eugene, Oregon, was told by his flight agency that he's able to give interviews and to talk about it. That would have been unheard of 5, 10 years ago. Now, it's just a fun conversation.
And as far as like how you would compare the Oregon sighting to what's going on the East Coast?
It's not surprising, to say the least, because we're seeing these objects all across the United States. Yes, mainly on the East Coast at this time, but the West Coast is also very popular for their UFO encounters as well. So for a state like Oregon to see these strange things, it's no surprise. Oregon in itself has a lot of strange sightings. We can look at California, which is right next to it. So could they be one and the same? I don't know about that. But for me, is that it's being spoken about on a daily basis, that maybe people are just being more in tuned with this news and it's always happened, but we're just now getting the public coverage on it today.
And I have to ask you, I've seen a lot of like pictures of you in space outfits, futuristic outfits. Are those like CGI, or do you actually do cosplay and those type of things?
Those are AI, yeah. So
Okay.
I do have an interest in making those of just me in different environments and locations, but a lot of them are AI generated.
And someone actually said they thought you looked Italian. Just for the fans, where are you actually from? You seem to have a Spanish last name.
Yes, yeah. So I'm my mom's Venezuelan from the capital, and my dad is Mexican American. So I am like full-blooded Latina. Speak Spanish, love everything about it. But raised here in the States.
And you have a website with merch, and I gotta say, you were wearing a toque in one of your updates the other day, and you seem to be getting so hot by the end of the update, the podcast. Like it seemed like the sweat was increasing as the podcast went on. So I guess your toques work pretty well.
I I try not to sweat. Girls don't sweat, Devin. What do you mean? What are you talking about? I do have a website. It's ufonews.co, not .com. There, it's it's ad free. It's free to access the website for all the articles that I write on my research, but it's also a UFO aggregate website. So anywhere where UFO is new, where the term UFO is mentioned in the news internationally, you can find it on my website. That's probably one of the best places to stay up to date as to what's going on. I also have a whole section on my website that's telling us what's happening in New Jersey, all the latest articles that are being written on that, because it is updated automatically as soon as that article comes out. You can find it directly on my website at ufonews.co. As for my merch, it's currently not for sale. It's only for my Patreon members at this point in time, but maybe I'll consider selling it in the future. I don't know as of yet. But the best place to find me, my work, and to stay up to date on UFO news is ufonews.co.
And that is a pretty good website. I've been researching it a lot lately, and we have the links to all of your social media in the description. You do a podcast that's very good with Jimmy Church. I first discovered him. He has the best interview I've heard of about UFOs with Tom DeLonge, which is from like 11 years ago. I wish he
Yes.
could get a follow up because it seems like I was mentioning this the other day with someone. It seems like Tom will only do interviews with like radio people that only know him for his music career, and he never really like dives right into it. But could you tell us a little bit about Jimmy and how you guys got working together? Because you guys are really good together on camera.
Thank you. So I do several shows on my show on my channel every week and on my podcast. And I do one with Jimmy once a week out of the 3 that I do. And we our show is called Mysteries with a History, where we cover everything pertaining to UFOs and cases that are happening that took place in the past, but also that are happening now. And years ago, I actually used to work for the Debrief that was created by Micah Hanks and Tim McMillan, and I actually met Jimmy through Micah Hanks. So because they're really good friends, so that's how we all met.
And I'm going to guess he's a musician, and I'm sorry if I don't know this, but with all the guitars in the background.
Yeah, he was a part of a band, and so now he has like 100 guitars as his backdrop. It's pretty crazy.
So, last question here. You mentioned Venezuela is part of your heritage. We've recently heard all about this Colares UAP incident and everything going on in Brazil. I interviewed the top researcher about that Colares incident recently. What are your thoughts on that? Because that seems to be in the modern era the best evidence of negative UAP stuff happening in relation to humans.
The Colares Brazil incident is one of my favorite cases. I researched it years ago, and I was really excited to see that Lua Elizondo had a chapter on it in his book Imminent. I was like, yes, more people need to know about this, because for years I was like, have you heard of this case? And they're like, no. And I'm like, are you joking? This case is actually insane. And it took place in 1977. It was a UFO flap, meaning it was seen over several days, in this case for 6 months. in this small fishing town in Colares, and actually in the surrounding towns as well. And what happened is that these people were seeing these craft in the sky that would shine this beam of light on people, create 3 puncture wounds in the chest or in the jugular area, completely paralyzed when these beams of light were placed upon them, and 2 people died. It got so intense that the mayor of Colares called the capital Brasilia, and he said, "Hey, I need you to send military equipment, military officials to my town right away. My people are terrorized. They are walking in groups everywhere. They're all sleeping in the same home. They can't do anything because they're so scared of these craft that are being seen every single night without fail as soon as the sun goes down. Can you come and take a look?" So the Brazilian military comes in and the people are rejoicing. They're like, "Yes, we're going to be protected. We're so happy. Thank you so much." Wait a second. Where are your guns? Where are your tanks? How are you going to save us? These military officials were holding papers, pencils, telescopes, and cameras as their equipment to save the people, which in reality, they were just there to observe the phenomenon that was later called Operação Plato or Operation Saucer. They stayed there for a few months. They took thousands of witness testimony, and then they left. Actually, after they left, these objects, these things in the sky went away. And then 20 years later, the captain of Operación Plato, Urangue Lima, finally speaks out to UFO magazine that was run by Brazilian ufologist AJ Javares, who just recently passed away. And Urangue Lima tells the world what he experienced and what his men experienced during the several months they were doing their investigations. And he had mentioned that everything that was collected by these witnesses were true. They have videos, they have drawings, they have photos as well. And some of it is now public information that was released through FOIA in the early 2000s because of AJ Javares. And you can find it on the Black Vault right now. But just about a month or 2 months after Captain Urangue Lima gave his testimony to the public for UFO magazine, he allegedly took his own life soon after. AJ Javares was very confused. He's like, this man was on top of the world. He was super happy. And so he ended up speaking to Urangue Lima's people that were close to him. And they had all mentioned that he would never take his own life. He was very happy. He was very pleased. And so there's a lot of conspiracy behind that. But the overall Colares Brazil incident is a remarkable one. And it was repeated again in 2016. That was reported by UFO researcher Ronnie Vernay, who was speaking to an indigenous town, actually kind of close to Colares. And they experienced things very similar. These craft were seen in the sky, and they were terrorizing the people in the area.
Very interesting. That seems like it definitely goes against the Stephen Greer mentality, where they're all there to help us, and anything that isn't like that, it's a government secret project. And if you don't believe him, pay him, and he can give you more evidence of it. But there seems to be a lot of Stephen Greer people fighting lately in the comments and stuff, which I'm sure you have in yours too. So I just couldn't help but think about that when you were telling that story.
I think that there are some positives to some of these entities, but when we're looking at Colares Brazil in particular, there's a lot of negatives. That's very scary for people to experience something like that. And 2 people passed away. They had this beam of light placed upon them, and they were in like this state of rigor mortis. The only doctor in the area couldn't help them. They were sent to the nearest local hospital, and they both passed away. When the doctor asked for the medical records, she wasn't given any information. It was almost classified information soon after, which is very strange. But you won't come across very many UFO encounters where people actually die. In this case, you do, and it's very shocking. But it has everything in this case, and is a lot of public information. Not all of it, but a lot of it is made public through FOIA that again was released in the early 2000s that can be found on the Black Vault website. It's one of my favorite cases just because there is so much information and it doesn't follow the narrative of, oh, these are all super friendly and they're here to cure cancer. There's also a very negative side to this topic that not many people want to look at.
And as far as the nuclear incursions, it could actually have to do for their own benefit if they have bases here. They may not want us to have nuclear war because it would affect their assets. And that's one of the things I think one of the things up there might be. There's all this talk about nuclear war. I think some of them might be up there kind of monitoring what's going on just in case something like that were to happen. So they could potentially do something about it because of their own assets. But that's just one thing. But I definitely think there's more than that potentially going on. But I got to throw this in because I didn't actually ask you about it when you were talking about it. What's your best theory of what's happening right now?
I recognize this name. Hi, Terrence. This will be my last question as I do have to run right after this. So thank you so much, Devin, for having me.
I'll let you
as
wrap it up after the question and I'll just
Yeah,
go take it home from
definitely. Yeah, I'll definitely answer your question. As to what's going on, I am just as much in the dark as you are. There is some data that's taking me in very specific directions that we had mentioned earlier today on this show, but I can't place all of my eggs in one basket and say, oh, they're all definitely A or they're all definitely B. The biggest takeaway is that these are being seen across the planet. Unless all of these governments across the world are like, hey, let's all do this at the exact same time to get that kind of thing to work is harder than what would be expected, right? So I wish I knew the answers as to what's going on. I don't, but I'm following the story as closely as I possibly can to give people the latest updates and the latest information as to what's going on. At the end of the day, only you can make up your own mind. I can give you the information, but I'll never tell you what it is. I'm not going to spoon feed you. Only you can make up your own mind.